14 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few tight ends I would start this week. The first guy, Dawson Knox of the Buffalo Bills. So Dawson Knox here, he's been pretty solid this season with the Bills, and it's been his breakout season for the most part, even though he had a down game in Week 13 versus the New England Patriots. But I know the Patriots' defense is good, and the winds and conditions were bad for the weather. In that one where he only had 2 catches, 14 yards, but Week 11 versus Indy, 6 catches, 80 yards. And Week 12 at the Saints, 3 catches, 32 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So Week 14, he's got a good matchup at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that give up the 9th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. And right here, they're going to have to move the ball a lot, obviously, versus the high-powered Bucs offense, where it's going to be a shootout between Buffalo, obviously, and Tampa. So I think Dawson Knox in this one could have a good game, 60, 70 yards possibly, and find the end zone. The next tight end is Dalton Schultz of the Dallas Cowboys. So Dalton Schultz, the last few weeks here, he's bounced back after having down weeks from weeks 8 to 10. Week 11 at Kansas City, 6 catches, 53 yards. Week 12 versus the Raiders, 3 catches, 45 yards, a touchdown, and a 2-point conversion. And Week 13 at the Saints, 5 catches, 43 yards. So Week 14, he's got a good matchup at the Washington football team that gives up the 15th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. So right here, Dalton Schultz, I think could have a good game versus Washington. Washington, their defense is decent, men, but don't break over the last few weeks. But Schultz is definitely a Dak Prescott favorite in that offense. And I think, once again, this week, 40 or 50 yards and possibly finding the end zone is a definite possibility for Schultz this week. The next tight end is Pat Freiermuth. Steelers, so Pat Freiermuth, he's been pretty decent the last few weeks here, and one of the better waiver wire pickups of the season at the tight end position. The last few weeks here for Freiermuth. Week 11 at the Chargers, 4 catches, 11 yards, a touchdown. Week 12 at Cincinnati, 4 catches, 40 yards, a touchdown. And Week 13 versus Baltimore, 3 catches, 26 yards, and a 2-point conversion. So right here, Week 14 at the Minnesota Vikings, they give up the 7th least amount of fantasy points to tight ends. But I still think here, Freiermuth's going to be a main target of big men. This is a Thursday night game where the scores are usually higher from both teams, where the defenses don't play much of a factor. So I think Freiermuth in this one could possibly have 70 or 80 yards and be a main target of Roethlisberger, especially as Chase Claypool doesn't play in this one as well. The next tight end, Zach Ertz of the Arizona Cardinals. So Zach Ertz here, he's been up and down so far on the season with the Arizona Cardinals. The last few games here for Ertz, Week 9 at San Francisco, 3 catches, 27 yards. Week 10 versus the Panthers, 4 catches, 46 yards. Week 11, a huge game at Seattle, 8 catches, 88 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then Week 13 at Chicago, he put in a flop of a ball game, a dud, 1 catch, 10 yards. But right here, Week 14, a great division matchup with the Rams and the Arizona Cardinals. And that's a Monday Night Football game. Well, we're going to see a lot of scoring, I believe, from both teams. So Zach Ertz in this one, I think, bounces back. I think he could have a good game. And he's a tight end I would start this week. In the 5th and final tight ends, Evan Ingram of the New York Giants. Of Evan Ingram, he hasn't really had much fantasy value this season here for the New York Giants. And the last few games for him really hasn't done much. Week 11 at Tampa, 2 catches, 12 yards. Week 12 versus Philly, 3 catches, 37 yards. And Week 13, he had a good PPR day, 4 catches, 61 yards. So right here, it looks like Daniel Jones is going to be out once again in this one in Week 14 at the Chargers. So right now, it's either going to be Mike Lennon once again starting for this Giant team, even though he's questionable with a concussion, or the other quarterback. So it looks like Fromm's going to start, unless, like I mentioned, Lennon comes off the concussion. So right here, Fromm's going to use the security blanket, I believe, in the tight end, Evan Ingram. And the Chargers do give up a lot of fantasy points, the 6th most on the season, to tight end. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Ingram have 50 or 60 yards with 4 or 5 catches once again in PPR leagues. So that's a few tight ends I would start for Week 14 of the fantasy football season.